Thank you, Jim. Let me invite you to take out your message guide, if you would, today, and we're going to be looking at the word from Matthew chapter 7 with regard to developing a firm foundation. Following the service, normally each week there are next step groups. The only next step group that's going to meet today is the one that is starting a new class. It's one that I'm teaching. It's going to be brief. We're recognizing the weather out there, but just want to introduce and let you know what the class is about. It is going to be on the book of Ezra. We're going to be in the Old Testament in this class, in this coming group, and what we want to do is we want to explore the book of Ezra in preparation for a sermon series that's coming a little bit later this year, more towards the Easter season and into the spring. And so we're going to be looking at the historical context. We're going to look at some of the things that are going on that we can apply to our lives and see as valid and important for us in our living out of our faith today. And so that'll meet afterwards. Just for probably 15 minutes to get information into your hands. But I want to draw your attention to the back of your message guide. It says Bethany at home. And basically one of the discussion groups that normally meets is a discussion group about the message and the things talked about. And each week we make available this little study for you pretty much every week. Sometimes there's just too much material to include one, and so my ramblings, quote unquote, flow over into the back, and so we don't include something there. But this week what I did was provided something for you to kind of take a little bit of a deeper look at Matthew 7. And rather than just put a series of questions, I've broken it up into some observations and one observation each day. So each day I'm going to invite you to read Matthew chapter 7 as a passage that talks about the issues of having a firm foundation and finding ourselves in Jesus and on Jesus, and to kind of explore some concepts from that. So I invite you to do that and to make use of this during the week if you would. So just for you to be aware of. We're in the midst of a series of messages, or actually a year of messages, that are going to focus on the idea of a firm foundation. Our theme verse for this year is from 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11, where Paul points out to the Corinthian believers that Jesus is a firm foundation. There is no other foundation for us in our lives than Jesus. And the reason we're focusing on this particular thought and theme for the year, and why it will be a stepping off point for our messages and our times, is because we're coming off of and have reached a 5-year point since my coming. And prior to my coming, the church prepared a document that was kind of the marching orders or the summation of the thoughts of the church with regard to where they saw the challenges, where they saw the church needing to move, and some things that they saw the church needing to do. And so that document, as it was written as a 5 to 7 year kind of put in place, do these things document. And so some months ago, I spoke to our deacons and I said, we're at 5 years now. It's important for us to go back, as this has kind of been our guide, to review how we've done and some of the things that we've accomplished. And are there things that are in there now that really don't apply anymore, that we can let go and move to the side? Are there new things that we need to look at? And so one of the things that I wanted to do this year as we discuss those issues is visit some themes like values. What are our church's values? What do we as Bethany Baptist Church value? How would we put that in words? And along with those values, what are some of the virtues, the heart things that make us us? And what are some of the the things that are a part of what do we do that flesh these things out? And it may call, as we work through these things over the next year, it may call for some changes. It may call for some challenging conversations. It may mean that some Sunday mornings I'm going to share some things from God's Word that may be a little, whoa, I don't know about that. I'm going to have to think about that. But there may be other places where we're going to celebrate together and we're going to say, my word, God has been good. Yesterday was an opportunity for us to kind of receive reports, and we sent those reports out during the week last week. And if you received those reports as members, sprinkled throughout those reports were just the fingerprints of God and the good things that are happening. And we're going to talk about those in a couple of weeks. I'm going to do my first. It's something that I was doing in other churches, but I haven't done it here to date. We're going to do basically a state of the church message, where we're going to talk about some of the things that are going good, some of the things that we may need to talk about from your pastor's perspective. And all of that kind of centering on the issue of God's word and how God's word gets woven in the midst of that. But for our year together, we want us to talk about our mission, our vision, the values, the virtues, those things that make Bethany Bethany, that are important to kind of hammer out as we move forward. And as we do that, I want us to just reflect on the idea, as the slide says, that God has been faithful to us through the generations. That God has never left us. That there have been hard days, there have been awesome days, that there have been ebbs and flows in the ministry of Bethany as a church, but God has been faithful. And so long as we continue to allow Him to be our firm foundation, we will continue, and we will trust God for growth. We will trust God for His blessing on the things that we are doing here to honor Him and glorify Him. And so that's a little bit of where we're going. And the theme verse and the theme thought, I wanted to just take us Sunday and kind of speak to that. And that's from Matthew chapter 7, which Jim read for us a few moments ago. Matthew chapter 7 is at, if you would, the tail end of Jesus' time on the Sermon on the Mount. And he is sharing with those individuals that are there some very just basic, straightforward teaching about what it means to live for God and how we do that. And so at the very end, he comes to this firm foundation moment. And in some ways, it's kind of a summation that, of all the things I've shared, people who are listening to me and all here on the mountainside, unless you've put your firm foundation in Christ, in His word and in His desires, and seek to follow Him, you're just going to find that it just gets washed away. All of your own individual trying and endeavors will just not stand in the midst of the struggles. And so we're going to unpack that today, and we're going to try to do that. I almost want to close the curtains and have a surprise at the end. But we're going to do that from Matthew 7 this morning. And so let me invite you, if you haven't turned in your Bibles, to turn there. If you're using a Bible that's available in front of you, that's page 855, and you can follow along in that way. One of the things that is obvious in terms of this picture that Jesus gives us in Matthew 7 is that he is talking about building. He's talking about houses. He's talking about homes. He's talking about structures, if you would. And I wonder if I could ask the question, do you like where your house is? Do you like where your house is? Now, I'm not necessarily asking, do you like your house? Because I think when it came to COVID, one of the things they found out was people started spending a whole lot of time in their house. And once they started spending a whole lot of time in their house, they recognized, boy, I really don't like this house as much as I thought. There's some things about this house that I would change. And all of a sudden you saw a boom of people trying to get out of these houses that they loved so much into another house, that maybe over time they'll find they don't love that one so much either. But, do you like where your house is? Some people have purchased homes, and perhaps you purchased your home a long time ago, and you found that the neighborhood has changed. That all of a sudden, that neighborhood that you kind of adored and kind of was so wonderful 10, 15, 20 years ago isn't so wonderful and great right now. And so you're like, boy, I don't know, I really like my house, but if I could pick up this house and I could move it somewhere, I would. I'd move it somewhere else. I'd move it down the road, or I'd move it across town. So do you like where your house is, physically speaking? And if you could, would you just leave it? Would you move somewhere else, or would you pick it up and carry it away? and put it in a different spot. Spiritually speaking, about our spiritual homes, spiritually speaking, when it comes to, if you would, in a larger application, our church, I guess the question is, some of us, do we like where we're at? Do we like our neighborhood? Do we like the way that things are? Do we find that what do we think about that? And where do we, if I had the freedom, I'd leave it in a heartbeat. One of the things that a lot of churches have found coming off of COVID, and in some ways I just want to let COVID just kind of go into the distance. But one of the things that churches are still finding as they think about things with regard to that is that COVID opened the door for people who were kind of half in the church, half out of the church, kind of opened the door for them to finally disconnect. And we've had to follow up with some people and say, hey, where you at and what's going on? And we've had to have some of those conversations. But for some churches, they're still having those conversations and they're still trying to sort through those issues. And so one of the things that we're looking at here is this house building. And at this 5-year place for us together, and for Bethany as a church that is at its 127th, I think, going into its 128th year, what are we thinking about the house that God has given us? And what do we think about where it is? And how would we look at the foundation and think about those things? So I want to do that today by looking at and kind of set the stage for some of this with Matthew chapter 7. Now, I think that Jesus gave us this story, and he gives this story to the people, and he wants them to know how to construct their life on a secure piece of land, a secure piece of spiritual property, if you would. And we need to make sure that we're not building our house on the sand, as the scripture passage says. We need to build it, as it says, on the rock. So let's take a look at this again and begin to unpack it. What is really neat is in this passage, Jesus kind of closes this out, and the actual story runs from verse 24 down to verse 27, but verses 28 and 29 are kind of tagged on the end there, and they do bring a closure to the story and the people who are listening, but it does bring a unique application there. And in some sense, what Jesus is saying as he shares it is that he's sharing with them that Jesus, that kind of like he got it. He understood, but the religious leaders who were there, they really didn't. They really didn't understand what was going on and how this principle of building well and building on secure things worked. Jesus, it says, he spoke with authority because of his life, but when they spoke, they really didn't have authority because their life wasn't founded on these secure things. So I want to talk about some house construction today. Trust me, if I am ever not a pastor, I'm not going to buy a trailer and go and try to fix people's houses. Don't want that. Don't hire me. It'd be better to just give me money to stay away from your house. And maybe that's a great way to make a living, is to pay people to not do things in some sense rather than to pay them to try to do them. So first thing I want us to see this morning, we're going to actually see just a few things, is I want us to see that we all need an architect. When it comes to building spiritual houses, we need an architect. In the same way that if we were to purchase a piece of land and want to build a house, we would need someone to kind of design that house. We would need an architect to help us to work through those issues. We need somebody who knows how to do these things. This is what it says, verse 24. It says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who builds his house on the rock. It's important to listen, Jesus says. It's important to hear the voice of the architect, to the one who designs, who knows how to put these things together. Some of us listen to the right architect, and some of us, just quite honestly, we don't listen to the right architect. We listen to the wrong architect. The architect, he determines the blueprint. He's the one who puts it together. He determines the layout of the house, where the rooms go. The architect's work is pretty simple. He determines the inside of the house. And he determines this by kind of looking at the people who are going to live there and what they want to do and how they want to use the house and how it's going to be utilized, if you would. He considers the needs and the functions of these things so he knows where to put the certain rooms, how to manage those things. Some people, if they build a house, they work from home, so they want an office space in the house. Other people don't work from home, they work from an office elsewhere, so they don't need to consider that type of space. And so that goes into the planning. Some people love to entertain, so they want big open spaces so that people can mill around and enjoy fellowship. Other people, they just like to do their own thing. And so they don't necessarily need those big open spaces the same way somebody else would. He determines the inside of the house. He gets to know the people and determines the needs. But second, he also determines the outside. The appearance, actually, when it comes to building a house, of the outside is determined by what's on the inside. It's determined by the layout on the inside, the walls and where they are, and the windows and where they need to be, affects the outside of the house. And so when you think about it, if we like it, wouldn't we be crazy to ignore an architect and what they bring to the table? We'd be crazy to ignore that. And in the same way, spiritually speaking, if Jesus or God is our architect, we would be silly to ignore him and the wisdom that he brings to putting together a life that will work well, function well, look well, that it will serve well and stand well in the midst of challenges. So this architect that we need, what are we talking about here with regard to God? First thing we need to see here is that God gives us the blueprint for the house. We need to hear his words. We need to listen to his words. We need to be, let me tell you, what you get at Bethany on Sunday morning is just not enough. It's not enough for you to navigate all of the things of life. You need to be in the Word personally yourself. You need to be having a personal devotional time. You need to be involved in a small group or a next step group. You need to be looking to him, studying, knowing his words, because he knows how it is best laid out. And so the transforming truth is really simple for today. It's this: it's that God is the architect of our life. That's what the word shows us. And so we need to listen to him. We need to listen to him. God's blueprint is the best blueprint. But one of the things we also need to see is that God's blueprint, this house, is identical. It's identical on the outside. He's trying to build a house, and it's going to be the same. If God is the architect of our life and we follow him, pretty much the outside of the house is going to be identical. Do you understand what I'm saying there? That if we all follow God and what God's directives and commands and desires are for our life, we're all going to look pretty much the same. We're all going to be pretty much doing the same thing. You see, when a church reaches a place where it's not a united church, or it's a church that's fractured, more than likely it's because there are individuals in the midst of it who just aren't following the architect's plans well. And so, I'm this, or I like that. And all of a sudden it kind of gets ruptured and it gets fractured in that sense. And so we see that he as he opens these and designs these blueprints, in the end, the colors may be different and the windows may look a little different, but essentially it's identical on the outside. There's no telling what my house will look like, but I do know it'll be pretty much identical to everyone else's. Let me suggest this also, that God isn't the one who builds the house. While he's the architect and creates the blueprint, and while they all end up pretty much the same way, identical, why? Because he's building this Christ-likeness and all of these things into us, one of the things that's also true is that he doesn't build the house. Who builds the house? It says in the verse that we were looking at, verse 24, it says, "Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I liken him to a wise man who what? Builds his house." So we build the house, and the premise is that if we were to build the house well, we would be listening to him because he knows best what we need. And if we are wise, we are doing what he tells us to do. We follow his instructions. He gives those. But he isn't the one who puts them into practice. We do it. We are the one who work those things out. And so we really have two options here when it comes to our architect. The first option is that we know the blueprint, we know what he wants, but we don't follow it. We do our own thing. And the second option is this, is that we know the blueprint and we do it. And so this morning, the question is, first, are we willing to let God be our architect? And if he is the architect and is the one who knows the way that things should be, are we willing to allow him to guide us as we build the house? Are we willing to let him guide us? Or do we want to kind of do our own thing, follow our own ideas? We need an architect. The second thing we see, we need to choose the land. If we're going to build a house, we need to have a place to put it. We need a location. Where will it be? It's interesting. I'm kind of I don't know. I like vintage. I like not vintage isn't the right word. I like older TV shows. I'll put it that way. And so all of a sudden, I've gotten into watching Leave It to Beaver. Now, if you've never watched Leave It to Beaver, some of you are chuckling, so you know what I'm talking about. But I just watched an episode where, Hugh Beaumont and Barbara Billingsley, mom and dad, they're going and they're looking for a new piece of land to build a house on. And the guy's taking them around to these pieces of land and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, this is too expensive. Oh, this is so far away. But this is the up and coming neighborhood. They're even going to have sidewalks, he says. And so they're looking for a piece of land in the same way when it comes to building our personal spiritual house, or it comes to building the spiritual house of God that we call Bethany. We need to think about what kind of a land, what kind of a property are we going to build it on? What's going to be the place that we're going to put this building that we're building? Again, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, it says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine, he does them, I will liken him to a wise man. He builds his house on the rock. Verse 26, however, goes on and says, but everyone who hears these sayings of mine, these words, and does not do them, he will be like the foolish man who builds his house on the sand. So we have to choose the land, and here Jesus lays it out, and he says there's this man, and he's going to build the house, and he hears my words, and he chooses to build this house on the rock, on rock. And he says there's another man, he hears these same sayings of mine, he hears these same things, but he chooses to build these things on the sand. We need to find a place, and we need to make a wise decision about this. Or, if you would, we can make a foolish decision and build in the wrong place. So we need to be wise, first thing, about where we put the house. There are options about where this could be. There's a wise option and a foolish option. Let me suggest this. The first thing is that he says there's a wise man. The word for wise is phronimos. It's the idea of being thoughtful. It's a person who's understanding. It's a person who's prudent, a person who's intelligent. And so there's the kind of builder, the kind of person, the spiritual person who's thoughtful and understanding and informed and prudent and intelligent about where he's going to build and how he's going to pursue living for Jesus. But he says there's this second kind of person, and as he looks and as he pursues building, he is foolish. The foolish word there is moros. And if you kind of play with that word a little bit, you can kind of get to a place where I'm going to tell you, moros is basically kind of like the word moron. There are people who are wise, prudent builders, and there are people who are just morons. Other ways that the word is translated, it's interesting, they are deficient. People who are deficient. And another word, they're stupid. There are wise builders and there are kind of like stupid builders. There are deficient builders, builders that aren't thinking. They're not intelligent. They're not thoughtful or understanding about what's going on here. One of the things that's been interesting, it's popped up more and more, and I don't know if and I don't know the logistics of it, but it just popped into my mind because I saw a post for this yesterday, was that there is a certain kind of mineral or certain type of something in the soil in places in Massachusetts that leads to the breakdown of foundations. And I don't know the specifics of it, but a person who knows that this is there but still chooses to build there is a person who's deficient, is a person who's not thinking, is not understanding, if you would. That's not an intelligent person. Why would I build a house in a place where I know where I'm going to build it is going to lead to its demise? And there are people even now who are making claims and are trying to pursue remedy with regard to their homes and their foundations being built in places where the foundation isn't going to stand the test of time. So we have an architect, our God, who tells us how to build the house. And he lays it out so that we can build a place and have a place where it honors him and it glorifies him. But where we build it is important. The land we build it on is important. And so we need to be wise about where we put the house, but we need to, secondly, we need land or a parcel where there is a stone. He calls it a rock. He builds his house on a rock. But it's not just any kind of rock. It's the idea of stone. The word that's used there is petra, and it's a word that speaks of stone, but more specifically, it speaks of the expanse of bedrock. It's not just a stone, if you would, but it's large stone. It's secure. It's a firm foundation. Many of us, in Maine, we owned a home, an older home, kind of a Victorian gingerbreadish kind of home. And if you went down in the basement, there were huge granite blocks that were set upon each other to make the house stable and stuff like that. And we felt pretty good. We kind of felt like there could be a whole lot of shaking going on or an earthquake, and this wasn't going anywhere. But this isn't talking about individual stones. It's the idea of a firm foundation, an undergirding of stone that is secure and firm. And so he says here that we need to build our house on this firm foundation. Luke chapter 6, he speaks in this parallel passage in Luke 6, he says, he dug down deep and laid foundation on rock. On rock. Over in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4-6, Peter says this, coming to him as to a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by God and precious, you also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices to God through Jesus Christ. Therefore, it is also contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious. He who believes on him will by no means put to shame. What's he saying here? He's saying there is this cornerstone, there is a stone, there is a rock, that if you build yourself on it, if you allow it to align the course and the walls and the structure of your life, you will in no means be put to shame. It leads us to our verse for the year, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ, the cornerstone. So let me ask you this. Will we allow God to be our architect? Will we allow him to determine and to lead us as we build? Will we choose to build what we build on a firm foundation, on a stone, a good foundation? Will we allow Jesus Christ to be the one to determine and to lead and to set the things straight? There's a picture floating around. I couldn't find it. I'm not sure where it is, but there's a picture of several people when they laid the cornerstone to this building that we're in right now. And I couldn't put maybe I'll find it this week or something like that, and I can use it in in another message, or put it out on Facebook and let you see it with a note. But the cornerstone, it's there, which allows things to stay straight. It allows things to be lined up. And so Jesus is that cornerstone. He's that firm foundation. He is the rock. As the song has said, he's the one on which we stand. Let me suggest third that we choose the style of the house. And I'm using style kind of loosely. The architect, he lays out the blueprint, and all of that affects the style of what the house looks like on the outside. What are the rooms on the inside that make up the blueprint? They change the shape of the house and the style. And so what is the style of the house? What would that be spiritually? I want to suggest to you that when it comes to spiritually speaking, our house, I would look over in Galatians chapter 5. That when it comes to putting together a house, in the larger sense, it's built on God and his principles, and it's fleshed out, it's organized and lived out in a very practical way. This is the fruit of the Spirit. It says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. We ought to see these kind of as the rooms in our house. We build this house where God is glorified in God's work, and in this house goodness abounds. Long-suffering happens. Kindness is displayed. We see that faithfulness in the midst of whatever may come our way is the watchword. We're gentle to one another. We practice self-control, and all of that under the umbrella, if you would, of love. These rooms are the fruit of the Spirit, and I guess here's my question. How often do you visit these rooms? When's the last time you visited the gentleness room? When's the last time you went and spent some time in the joy room and you just celebrated and had that internal celebration that comes from the fact that you know Christ? And you walked out of that room and you said, boy, that was just great. That was a great visit. There are some places in our house that we rarely go. Some of us have larger houses, and if you would, there are rooms we don't visit very often. Sometimes that can get us into trouble. We don't spend a lot of time in our basement. Our basement is essentially my second office filled with boxes and boxes of books and notes and file folders and more notes and more boxes of books. But Debbie was down there working and unpacking some things, and she made a discovery about the brand new heating system that we had installed, that it was not working correctly. You see, we didn't know it wasn't working correctly, but she happened to go down there and notice it. And so we need to, for the health of our house, we need to every once in a while check some things out. In the same way, spiritually, you and I personally need to check out some of the things that are a part of our house. I wonder, as a church, how often do we spend some time thinking about how kind we are to one another? And whether we love each other the way that God would desire? Do we practice long-suffering and bear with one another in things? So we choose the style. It makes the house a little bit different on the outside. It's identical, but the windows are just in different places. We live it out in different ways. It's affected by the events and the circumstances. We're at different places in our lives, and differences change the style. But the basic house is still identical. But the degree to which we live out these key room principles of love, joy, peace, patience, long-suffering, and kindness, and faithfulness, self-control, gentleness, those are important. We also have the issue of curb appeal. We want to have some curb appeal in our house. We want to be attractive. Can I tell you one thing that's attractive about Bethany? Is that you guys are just super welcoming. You see somebody that you don't know, and you go and you introduce yourself, and there are some people who I know, they kind of post themselves and they sit in a particular place. Why? Because it kind of keeps them in the flow of things. It gives them the opportunity to talk to people and to engage. Some of you have caught a vision for wanting to be that kind of welcoming place. by helping with the cafe and having a place where somebody can have a cup of coffee, being involved in a first impression team, whether that's ushers or greeters, those types of things. Curb appeal. You like being able to drive down the street and say, gosh, man, that is a beautiful house. That's a beautiful house. When people drive past Bethany or they meet Bethany people, our hope is that we'll grow and people will more and more say, gosh, that is a beautiful place. God's doing wonderful things there. Curb appeal is important. Just like in your own house, you might change the door, you might paint something, you might choose to do some landscaping. In that same way, we do those things in order to be more inviting to the world around us. Let me suggest this, finally. We choose the quality of the home. We can allow God to be the architect. We can build that house on a solid place. We can choose to live more and more the way that God wants, and that will affect the style and the kind of the curb appeal, if you would. But what about the quality? We're not simply dealing with a house. One of the things that we need to be honest about is a house ultimately becomes a home. It's a personal space. It's a relationship space. It's not just a physical space. So 2 thoughts here. Will it function? When we build it, will it function well? Is it going to actually accomplish the reason and the purpose for which it was built? Will it actually do those things? So I guess the question is, when we think about mission and vision in the coming weeks and months, one of the questions in the backdrop is the way that we do things, is the quality of our build such that it actually accomplishes our mission and vision? Does it actually allow us to do those things and to do them well and to do them better? So we'll ask that question. Will it function? And will it have impact? Will it have impact? Lasting impact. One of the things that is an important differentiation, I think, to make is impact is one thing, impression is another. Like some people, we leave an impression, but do we leave impact? You make an impression from a distance, you impact up close. And so we want to be people who, when people come to our house, we make an impact on their lives. We need to be careful how we build. A number of years ago, and I'm closing with this, a number of years ago I was in Europe, and we were in Italy. I had the opportunity to go twice on 2 different study kinds of things for school. And each time we visited Pisa and went to the Leaning Tower. I don't know how much you know about the story of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I almost said pizza. Well, if I say that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Bonanno Pisano was the architect. He began work on that project. He wanted a separate standing 8-story bell tower there in the city of Pisa. But there was a problem. The builders, as they discovered and built in the soil, saw that it was much softer than they expected or anticipated. And so the foundation for it to stay straight and true was too narrow. They didn't dig deep enough. So after long, it began to tilt. And many of you have seen pictures of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And it has continued to tilt until finally they realized there was nothing that would be able to be done to set it straight. And so it took 176 years to build the tower in total. They tried shoring up the foundation, making the levels, changing the levels so the levels were more in keeping with what was actually straight than where the building was going. After about 800 years, the tower now leans 18 feet, probably more. That's the number that I could find at this point. And one day it's going to fall. And the reason it's going to fall is because it was built on a bad foundation. And so this morning, I guess I want to leave with you some thoughts as we set up our year. And that is, Will we be willing to trust the architect for the building that we built? We ought to, because he knows best. Are we willing to allow him to organize the inside and the structure? Are we willing to follow him in the things of God's Spirit and the Spirit's work in our life, so that the rooms and the places and the things inside of there are touched with the issues of love and joy and peace and patience and all of those things? So that when people see the house, they see the house is built in a way that's attractive. And people say, wow, I want to check that out. I wish my house was built like that. This is going to be a year of exploration. It's going to be a year of discovery. It's going to be a year in some senses of dialogue at different points. There'll be times for us to meet together to just talk about church and some of the things that are happening in some of the directions. But in all of these things, can we affirm together that Christ is our firm foundation? That he is the one that we want to honor the most, and that we will together seek to lay a foundation in this place, in this community, where he's lifted up, he is honored, he's glorified, and hopefully will draw people to himself. May he use us well. We're going to close our service today, and the song is the closing. We're going to go back. We're going to sing the song that the worship team shared with us earlier, Firm Foundation, and then we'll be on our way. If you'd like to participate in the Ezra Next Step group, I want to invite you to join me just briefly following the service this morning in Classroom A. There is coffee, so hey, if you're a hardy soul and you don't mind the beauty of the snow and running around, and that's okay, we'll meet you in the cafe. But travel safe, and God bless you as we walk with him throughout the week. Let me invite you to stand.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaken. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful.
You are dismissed.
You're dismissed.